In the years following the trial, the story of Macy Allerton became a symbol of both the devastating consequences of abuse and the slow, fragile process of healing. For a long time, Everdell struggled to move past the horror that had unfolded within the town's borders. The scars left behind were not only on Macy and her family, but on the community itself. People who had once lived comfortably in ignorance now wrestled with guilt, shame, and a deep need for understanding. The questions lingered. How had no one seen? How had they looked the other way? And more importantly, how could something like this be prevented from happening again? Macy's recovery was neither quick nor linear. When she first entered the care system, she was a quiet shadow of herself. She rarely spoke, often staring out windows or retreating into silence for hours. The therapists who worked with her faced an enormous challenge. Years of manipulation had fractured her trust in others, especially in men. Her relationship with her father was tentative. Gerald struggled to connect with his daughter, wanting to be her protector but unsure how to break through the walls built by trauma. It took time, months, then years of consistent support and care to see real progress. Small milestones became monumental victories. The first time Macy smiled genuinely. The first time she spent an afternoon with a friend outside the system. The first time she told her own story without breaking down. These moments were quietly celebrated by those around her. Her recovery was a testament to human resilience, but also a reminder of how much damage abuse can inflict. She carried scars that would never fully disappear, shadows that might never be completely banished. In the broader community, efforts to heal came in many forms. Everdell schools introduced mandatory education on recognizing and reporting abuse. Community centers hosted workshops on mental health and trauma-informed care. Local law enforcement underwent training to better identify signs of coercion and grooming, focusing on prevention as much as response. These changes were born from the painful lessons of the Allerton case and represented a commitment to never let silence or fear protect abusers again. The case also sparked wider conversations about the nature of family and trust. Many people in Everdell realized how deeply complicated family dynamics can be, how love and harm can sometimes exist in the same space. The town struggled to redefine what safety meant, not just physical safety, but emotional and psychological security. People became more vigilant, more willing to question the quiet lives behind closed doors. Years later, Macy chose to speak publicly about her experience, not in graphic detail, but in terms of survival and hope. She became an advocate for victims of abuse, working with organizations dedicated to helping others escape cycles of control. Her voice carried weight precisely because it came from someone who had lived through the darkest realities and emerged determined to rebuild her life. She reminded others that healing was possible, even after unimaginable trauma. Yet, even with progress, there were challenges. Macy faced ongoing battles with anxiety, trust, and the trauma that lingered beneath the surface. She worked hard to reclaim her identity beyond the victim narrative. Education became a key focus. She enrolled in community college, determined to build a future defined by her own choices. The path was difficult, but with support, she carved out a space where she could grow beyond her past. Gerald, too, found a new purpose. The pain of his uncle's betrayal never fully left him, but he channeled his grief into helping other families affected by abuse. He volunteered with local organizations, sharing his story in hopes of preventing others from experiencing what he had. His relationship with Macy, once strained and uncertain, slowly strengthened as they both navigated the long road to healing. The house on Pine Street, once the center of unspeakable pain, was gone. In its place was an empty lot, a silent reminder of a nightmare erased. Occasionally, new families moved into the neighborhood, unaware of the history beneath their feet. The town chose not to forget, however. A memorial plaque was installed in the town square, dedicated to survivors of abuse and those who worked to protect them. It served as a reminder that vigilance and compassion were essential weapons against darkness. As the years passed, the Allerton story became part of Everdell's collective memory, a cautionary tale and a source of hope. It forced the town to confront the uncomfortable truths about silence and denial, but also showed the power of community, resilience, and justice. The scars would remain, but so would the lessons learned. Macy's journey from captivity to advocacy, from silence to voice, became a beacon for others trapped in similar situations. Her story was told not just as a crime, but as a testament to the strength of the human spirit to endure, to fight, and to reclaim life after trauma. It was a story that demanded attention, compassion, and action. In the end, the tragedy of the Allerton family was more than a hidden crime. It was a painful awakening. It revealed how darkness can grow quietly, masked by normalcy and trust, and how the bravest act is to break that silence. For Macy and Everdell alike, the future held no promises of forgetting, but it did hold the promise of healing, and with healing, the possibility of hope. Once the insurance policy was in place, Celeste's demeanor began to shift in subtle but noticeable ways. Aaron, still wrapped up in his feelings for her, chalked it up to stress or changes in routine, but those around them started to see something different. Celeste wasn't the sweet, devoted girlfriend she had once appeared to be. She became colder, more detached. She stopped joining Aaron on his weekend fishing trips, rarely cooked the meals they once enjoyed together, and frequently left town under vague excuses. She claimed to be helping her aunt recover from surgery in a city 2 hours away, a woman Aaron had never met and couldn't verify. At first, Aaron didn't question it. He believed in giving people space and trusting those he loved. But these trips became more frequent, sometimes lasting several days, and Celeste always returned with expensive gifts, new shoes, designer sunglasses, and gadgets that didn't match her modest lifestyle. When Aaron asked about them, she said her aunt had money and loved to spoil her. He accepted the explanation, even as doubt quietly began to creep in. What Aaron didn't know was that during those trips, Celeste was not visiting family at all. She was spending time with Max Delaney, a man she had met years ago in a different city under very different circumstances. Max had a criminal record that included burglary, drug charges, and a short prison sentence. He was impulsive, aggressive, and known for taking risks. Celeste had kept him in her life like a secret weapon, someone she could manipulate when the time was right. That time had come. Over late-night conversations and motel room meetings, Celeste fed Max a carefully constructed story. She told him that Aaron was abusive, controlling, and that she felt trapped. She said the only way she could be free and start a new life with Max was if Aaron was gone. At first, Max was hesitant. But when Celeste revealed that Aaron had a new life insurance policy worth $500,000 and that she was the sole beneficiary, Max's attitude changed. She promised him a cut, a life together, and everything they had ever wanted. All he had to do was help make Aaron disappear. Together, they began to plan. Celeste knew Aaron's habits better than anyone. She knew what time he left for work when he stopped for lunch, which nights he worked late at the garage, and, more importantly, where he went when he needed time to himself. Aaron often hiked alone in the nearby Ridgepine Trails, a quiet, scenic stretch of wilderness just outside town. He had been going there since childhood. Celeste had gone with him once, early in their relationship, and pretended to enjoy it. She remembered the trail markers, the remote areas without cell service, the hidden spots where few hikers ventured. It was the perfect location. To make the plan work, Celeste needed Aaron to go hiking again, and it couldn't seem forced. Over the next few weeks, she started encouraging him to get out more. She mentioned that he'd been working too hard, that he looked tired and stressed. She suggested a weekend hike, offering to pack him lunch and even map out a route for him. Her voice was caring, supportive, the same voice that had made Aaron fall for her in the first place. He didn't suspect a thing. When Aaron finally agreed, Celeste immediately informed Max. The plan was simple. Max would follow Aaron from a distance, wait until he was deep enough into the trail, and then strike. The murder would look like a tragic accident. A fall from a cliff, a misstep in a remote area, no witnesses, no suspicion. Just a grieving girlfriend collecting on a policy. In the days leading up to the hike, Celeste was unusually affectionate. She cooked Aaron's favorite meals, left him little notes, and even talked about future vacations. Aaron, unaware of what was coming, saw it as a turning point in their relationship. Maybe things were settling again, he thought. Maybe the stress was behind them. But behind the smiles and soft touches, Celeste was finalizing the last details. She made sure Max had a burner phone to communicate with her on the day of the attack. She packed Aaron's bag herself, slipping in snacks and a water bottle, all while thinking about how long it would take before she could file the claim. She even rehearsed her reaction, what she would say to police, how she would cry, who she would call first. The night before the hike she barely slept, but not from worry or fear. She was thinking about what she would do with the money. A new apartment in the city, a new car, a fresh start with Max. Her web was spun so tightly she couldn't imagine anything going wrong. As the sun rose the next morning, Aaron kissed her goodbye, thanking her for encouraging him to get some air. She smiled and told him to be careful. He walked out the door believing he'd be back by sundown. Celeste watched him leave, calm and composed. In her mind, it was already done. The morning of the hike was cool and crisp, with sunlight filtering through scattered clouds and dew still clinging to the grass. Aaron laced up his boots, the same ones Celeste had bought for his birthday, and headed out the door with a thermos of coffee and the backpack she had packed for him. He was looking forward to the solitude, the escape from work, noise, and everything that had been weighing on him. The ridgepine trails were quiet during the week, especially in early spring, and that made them the perfect place for reflection, or, as someone else had planned, the perfect place for something to go horribly wrong. Max Delaney had arrived in town 2 days earlier. He stayed at a rundown motel on the outskirts, paying in cash, using a fake name. Celeste had coached him through every detail: where to park, which trail to take, how far to stay behind, and what to do if anything went off script. Max wasn't nervous. He'd done worse things in his life and gotten away with them. This was just another job to him, only this time the payout was bigger. He had one task: make sure Aaron never came back from that hike. Aaron drove to the trailhead around 7:30 a.m., parked his truck in the small gravel lot, and headed into the woods. Max waited 15 minutes before stepping out of his own car, who'd pulled low, and began following the same path. The ridgepine trails wound through forested hills and sharp ridgelines, with long stretches of silence interrupted only by birds and the occasional rustle of a squirrel. There were no cameras, no rangers on patrol during the week, and very few hikers this early in the season. The isolation was almost complete. Aaron took his time, stopping to drink water and admire the early blooms along the trail. He had no idea someone was following him. Max stayed far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to keep him in sight. Around mile 4, the trail forked, with one path leading to a scenic overlook, a rocky outcrop with a stunning view of the valley below. It was the same overlook Aaron had visited many times. Celeste had suggested he go that way when she packed his bag. It was beautiful, quiet, and very, very dangerous. Aaron climbed to the edge of the overlook, pulled out his water bottle, and sat on a flat stone to rest. He took in the view, breathing deeply. That was when Max made his move. Creeping up behind him, Max used the element of surprise. He struck Aaron with a heavy rock, aiming for the back of his head. The blow was hard, but not fatal. Aaron collapsed, dazed, blood running down his neck, but still conscious. Max panicked, realizing it would take more force to finish the job than he had anticipated. A struggle broke out. Though injured, Aaron fought back. He managed to kick Max away and scramble to his feet. The two men wrestled near the edge of the cliff, dangerously close to the drop. Aaron tried to grab a tree root to keep himself from slipping, but Max came at him again, fists flying. Another punch, another shove. It was chaos, uncoordinated and brutal. Finally, Aaron lost his footing and rolled down a slope away from the main trail. Max believed the fall had done the job. Bloodied and exhausted, he didn't check for a pulse. He simply turned and fled, disappearing down the trail, retracing his steps back to the parking area, where he wiped down his prints and drove off, but Aaron wasn't dead. He lay at the base of the rocky slope, bleeding and semi-conscious. Hours passed. He drifted in and out of awareness, remembering flashes of what happened: the cliff, the pain, the boots. That's when something strange occurred to him. He had seen those boots before. Not just on the trail, but in his house. Celeste had given him an identical pair. The attacker had been wearing the same brand, same color, same everything. It was a small detail, but it stuck with him like a thorn in his mind. By sheer luck, a group of hikers stumbled upon him while taking a detour. They immediately called for help. An emergency team arrived by helicopter. Aaron was lifted out of the woods and rushed to the nearest trauma center, his condition critical but stable. Celeste was at home when she received the call. The voice on the other end said Aaron had been injured in a hiking accident. She acted devastated, gasping, crying, asking if he would be okay. She even rushed to the hospital, tears on cue, playing the role of the loving, terrified partner. Nurses comforted her. Doctors offered her updates. She nodded solemnly, holding Aaron's hand while he lay unconscious. But behind her eyes there was no grief, only calculation. As Aaron slowly recovered in the ICU, investigators began to look into the details of the incident. Nothing had been stolen from his bag. His injuries didn't quite match the story of a simple fall. The scratches on his arms and bruises on his torso suggested a fight, not an accident. And when he was finally able to speak, the first thing he mentioned was those boots. The police listened carefully, the trail he described, the sudden attack. The boots identical to the pair Celeste had given him. It wasn't much to go on, but it was enough to raise questions. Quiet ones at first, whispers of doubt. Suspicion without proof, but something wasn't right. And they were going to find out what. In the days following the attack, Aaron's slow recovery became the center of attention for everyone who knew him. Friends visited, neighbors sent cards, and Celeste remained a constant presence at his bedside. She cried, she held his hand, and she whispered encouragement when others were around. But when she was alone, she stared blankly at the machines, calculating time and probability. Every hour Aaron survived made her more anxious. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The plan had been clean, silent, final. Now it was unraveling. Police initially treated the incident as a hiking accident, as Celeste had hoped. But as detectives interviewed Aaron and began examining the scene, the inconsistencies started piling up. The location where Aaron was found wasn't directly beneath the overlook. The slope he'd fallen from didn't match a typical misstep. His injuries, while serious, were inconsistent with a simple fall. Scrapes and bruises on his forearms and chest suggested he had been in a struggle. One of the officers who had hiked the trail himself immediately sensed something was off. So, investigators began a deeper look into Aaron's background, and soon after Celeste's, Aaron had no enemies. No outstanding debts, no business conflicts. He was quiet, well-liked, and trusted by nearly everyone in town. But Celeste was a different story. Once the detectives began digging into her past, they uncovered a trail of questions. She had changed towns 3 times in 5 years. Her previous addresses didn't line up with her employment history. One former landlord recalled that she left without notice, and another claimed he had seen men come and go from her apartment at odd hours. She had no contact with her supposed family, and when the police tried to reach the aunt she claimed to visit during her trips, they found no record of the woman existing. Her financial history told its own story. Several maxed-out credit cards, payday loans, multiple shopping accounts. It was clear she was living beyond her means. But more damning than any of that was a recent wire transfer from a flagged account to a motel in the neighboring city just days before the attack on Aaron. The name used to check in, Mark Dillon, later identified as an alias for Max Delaney. Celeste had not only lied about her whereabouts, but had also maintained active communication with someone tied to criminal activity. When police obtained a warrant for her phone records, they found dozens of calls to a burner number. That number, traced through cell tower pings, was present on the Ridge Pine trails the day of the attack at the exact same time Aaron was fighting for his life. But the key moment that changed everything came from an insurance company report. Just 10 days before the hike, Celeste had called the insurance agency to inquire about how long a payout would take in the event of an accidental death, specifically one resulting from a fall or hiking accident. She had tried to sound casual, but the timing and nature of the question were recorded and flagged when news of the incident made headlines. The agent who spoke to her reported the call as suspicious. With a clear pattern emerging, investigators confronted Max Delaney. He had already fled town, but police tracked him down in a dingy apartment in the city. Caught off guard, he attempted to run but was quickly arrested. During interrogation, he cracked. Faced with evidence of the phone calls, the motel records, And surveillance footage of him buying a prepaid phone with cash, Max confessed. He admitted that Celeste had orchestrated the entire thing. She had promised him money, a new life, and love. He described the way she had coached him, how she had studied Aaron's routines, how she had even walked the trail with him once to point out the exact location to strike. Max's story was chilling in its detail. He showed police messages and photos Celeste had sent him, including one of Aaron's life insurance policy with her name on it. There was no question this was a premeditated attempt at murder. With Max's confession and the mountain of circumstantial evidence, police returned to Celeste. She was arrested at the hospital just outside Aaron's room. The image of her crying at his bedside hours earlier was still fresh in everyone's mind when the cuffs clicked around her wrists. The shock in the hospital was immediate. Nurses gasped. One of Aaron's friends, who had just dropped off flowers, watched in disbelief. Celeste didn't cry. She didn't resist. She said nothing as she was led away. The charges were severe: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice. She was held without bail as prosecutors built their case. Meanwhile, Aaron was moved to a rehabilitation center, slowly regaining strength, unaware that the woman he had loved was being exposed as the architect of his near-death experience. Word spread quickly in Pine Hill. A town that once viewed Celeste as charming and graceful now saw her as calculated and cruel. People recalled moments that suddenly seemed sinister. Times she asked about Aaron's schedule, her strange disappearances, the lavish purchases. All the pieces now fit a picture no one wanted to believe. Celeste's trial would come later. But already the truth had begun to surface. She hadn't been trying to build a life with Aaron. She had been building a plan to end his. The courtroom was packed on the day Celeste Moore stood trial. Reporters lined the hallway outside, flashing cameras and scribbling notes, while members of the small Pine Hill community filled the benches, struggling to reconcile the woman they once knew with the one accused of such a chilling crime. Dressed in a plain gray suit and showing none of the emotion she had displayed at Aaron's hospital bedside, Celeste sat silently beside her defense attorney, staring straight ahead. The prosecution laid out a case that left no doubt about her intentions. Over the course of several days, the jury heard about the life insurance policy, the phone records, and the suspicious inquiry Celeste had made to the insurance company shortly before the attack. They played recordings of jailhouse calls between Max and other inmates in which he described how Celeste had manipulated him. Screenshots of text messages between them were displayed on a projector, messages that included discussions of the best place to ambush Aaron, and even messages celebrating the presumed success of the plan just hours after the attack. Max Delaney testified under heavy police escort, clearly nervous but surprisingly candid. He admitted to attacking Aaron and explained how Celeste had orchestrated everything from when to strike to how to make it look like an accident. He claimed she promised him half of the insurance payout and a future together. His testimony was emotional at times, especially when he admitted that he didn't know whether Aaron had survived until his arrest. Under cross-examination, Max was grilled about his criminal past, but he never deviated from the claim that Celeste was the mastermind. Celeste's defense focused on discrediting Max. They painted him as a violent, jealous ex who acted alone out of spite. Her lawyer suggested that Celeste had no knowledge of the attack and that Max had twisted innocent conversations to suit his own narrative, but the evidence told a different story. Her internet search history included queries about silent poisons, staged accidents, and how long insurance companies take to process death claims. Her financial records showed desperate spending habits, and her personal journal seized during the investigation contained cryptic entries that prosecutors argued revealed her true mindset. Phrases like freedom soon and no more waiting were highlighted and read aloud in court. Aaron, though still recovering, took the stand. His physical injuries had begun to heal, but the emotional damage was evident. He spoke softly, recounting the events of the hike, the moment he was attacked, and the detail that stuck with him: the attacker's boots, identical to the pair Celeste had bought him. He talked about the trust he had placed in her, how he had never imagined she could want him dead. His testimony left the courtroom silent, many in the audience unable to meet his eyes. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just under a day. Celeste was found guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and insurance fraud. The judge, calling the crime cold, calculated, and devoid of remorse, sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She showed no emotion as the sentence was read. No tears, no protest, just the same blank expression she had worn from the beginning. Max Delaney, in a separate proceeding, was sentenced to 25 years for his role in the attack. In a letter he later sent from prison, he admitted he had been drawn in by Celeste's manipulation, blinded by greed and infatuation. He accepted full responsibility for what he had done but maintained that he would never have acted without her influence. The trial left a scar on Pine Hill, a town not accustomed to such darkness. People spoke in hushed tones for months afterward, revisiting every interaction they'd had with Celeste, searching for signs they might have missed. How could someone be so warm, so friendly, and yet capable of such betrayal? Aaron eventually left Pine Hill. The town had become a place of painful memories, and he needed distance to heal. He changed his phone number, deleted his social media, and moved to a coastal town hundreds of miles away. There, he found a small house near the water and a quiet job at a marina. He rarely spoke about what happened. He declined interviews, avoided press, and focused on rebuilding his life one small step at a time. Years later, someone who recognized him at the marina asked why he had scars on his arms and a limp when he walked. He simply smiled and said he'd had a fall during a hike. But those close to him knew the truth. They knew what he had survived. He had trusted someone with his whole heart, and that trust had nearly cost him his life. He had stared into the eyes of someone who had planned his death down to the smallest detail, all for money, but he had lived. And he had moved on. Celeste Moore would never again walk free. Max Delaney would grow old behind bars. But Aaron Blackwell would breathe the ocean air every morning, walk among people who didn't know his past, and live a life that, while scarred, was still his to live. Justice had been served. But the lesson remained, a haunting reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who smile while sharpening the knife.